and Radio 105.5 FM, and as well as the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Deerup Timal. I'm the chairman of this committee, and I would like our members to introduce themselves at this point in time. We'll start with the members who are present here, physically present, and then we'll go to our members who are online.
Lisa Morris Julian, Vice Chairman.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. Simon de Nobrega, member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal, member.
Good afternoon, Anil Roberts, member.
Thank you very much, members, for your introduction. And I'd just like to announce that the purpose of this meeting is to continue the committee's public hearing pursuant to its inquiry into the various measures in place to address the challenges of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is our third public hearing on this particular inquiry. We have officials with us from the Ministry of Public Utilities, Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, Solid Waste Management Company Limited, Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, the Water and Sewerage Authority, and the University of the West Indies. And just to remind all present and the listening and viewing public that the inquiries of the objectives of this particular inquiry are threefold. One is to assess the impact of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago. Two, to understand the challenges faced in treating with climate change. And three, to examine the effectiveness of measures being taken to mitigate the impact of climate change. So I would like to, first of all, ask for introductions so that members of the committee and the listening and viewing public would be familiar with who we have on board. And first, we'll go to the respective entities. First, I would like to ask officials of the Ministry of Public Utilities, please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members, colleagues, and stakeholders all. I am Nicolette Duke, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Curtis Augustine, Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator in the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Me, members also from the Meteorological Services. If you allow, they can introduce themselves at this time as well.
Yes, yes, sure.
Good day, everyone. Arlene Aaron Morrison, Acting Assistant Director, Meteorological Services Division.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Kiraki Soon, Acting Climatologist at the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Services.
Okay, thank you very much, officials of the Ministry of Public Utilities, including the Met Office. Now go to the ODPM, officials of the ODPM, for introduction.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. Good afternoon, other members of the committee, officials of other organizations, members of the public. I am Rodney Smart, the CEO of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members and all. My name is Muhammad Anwar Baksh, Planning and Development Officer, ODPM.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, all. My name is Dharas Pasa, Operations Manager, ODPM. UDPM.
Good afternoon, Francesca Peters, Training and Education Specialist.
Thank you very much, officials of the ODPM. We go now to the Solid Waste Management Company Limited.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Committee. Good afternoon to other stakeholders and agencies present. I am Jabari Jacob, Director of the Solid Waste Management Company of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members, and other agencies. I am Ria Ramdeen, Acting CEO at Trinidad and Tobago Solid Waste Management Company Limited.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am Abigail Whitehall, Head Programs and Technical Services.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am Maria Along, General Manager, QHSC, Quality, Health, Safety and Environment.
Thank you very much, officials of SUNCOL. We go now to the T&Tech.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee and all the members who are there this afternoon. Thank you for having T&Tech present. My name is Kelvin Ramsuk, General Manager at the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members, and all present. My name is Curtis Francois. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission.
Good afternoon, Chairman and other members of the committee, as well as stakeholder colleagues and the viewing public. I am Annabelle Brasnell, Corporate Communications Manager at T&Tech.
Hey, good afternoon, the Chairman, other members of the committee, and other person. I am Kisol Sandel, Chief Technical Officer at T&Tech.
Afternoon, Chair and members of the committee and colleagues at other agencies. I'm John Coulter, Acting Engineering Controller, substantively the Manager of System Control and Generation Interface at T&Tech. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. My name is David Sinclair. I'm the HSC Manager at T&Tech.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members and all present. My name is Nigel Bob, and I am the Acting CPO, substantively the Engineering Controller.
Thank you very much, officials from T&Tech. I'll now move on to WASA.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chairperson, members of the committee, other stakeholders. I am Ravi Nanga, Chairman of the Board of Commissioners of the Portland Waste Committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, members and members of other agencies. My name is Kelvin Rubin. I'm the Acting CEO of WASA.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the committee, and fellow colleagues from other agencies. My name is Roger Karen, Senior Manager, Regulatory Management.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee and other stakeholders. I am Shaira Ali, Director of Operations at.
Good afternoon, Chair. Members of the committee, representatives of the various agencies, and members of the public. My name is Keith Mead, Senior Manager, Water Resources Agency of WASA.
Thank you very much, Chairman of WASA and your other officials for joining us. I move now to the University of the West Indies and ask officials present to please introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ronald Rupnarang from UWI, lecturer in Agri-Environmental Disaster Risk Resilience. And I have with me colleagues from the Faculty of Engineering and the Faculty of Science and Technology. So I'll pass over to my colleagues, Professor Michelle Maiku and Aidan Farrell and Ricardo Clark.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am Professor Michelle Maiku, and I'm a Professor of Urban and Regional Planning. Welcome to, I'm happy to be part of the committee and to contribute. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Dr. Aidan Farrell, lecturer in plant physiology here at UWI, with a particular interest in the response of ecosystems to climate change, so agricultural, but also natural ecosystems.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Ricardo Clark, Senior Lecturer, Physics and Deputy Dean, Science and Technology, UWI.
Okay, thank you very much, officials from the UWI, headed by Professor Michael. The listening and viewing public would probably know that the University of the West Indies has been present with us for all our public hearings to date, including this third one. And the committee did make a decision after the first hearing that we would request their presence and their participation in all of the public inquiries that we have under this particular climate change inquiry. So we thank them for their time and the diligence and the work they have been putting in thus far. Okay, now that we have a fairly good idea of who are present and respective responsibilities, we'll go for opening remarks from the respective entities. These are brief opening remarks, just so that you can signal to the committee and also to the listening and viewing public, your thoughts on being here at this public inquiry. So first we go to Ms. Nicolette Duke, our Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Thank you, Chairman. The Ministry of Public Utilities is happy to be a part of this forum today. And this is especially so in regard of the fact that under our remit are housed several agencies that impact the quality of life and the living standards of the citizenry. In regard of climate change, we recognize the impacts, if not managed properly and if not responded to properly in terms of mitigation and adaptation, have the potential to have very deleterious effects on the standard of living of the citizenry. And so we are here to share what we have been doing to mitigate these impacts, as well as to hear from colleagues, the committee, and stakeholders of ways in which we can improve the measures that we have put in place. And so we hope that at the end of this sitting, we may all better be able to implement and probably enhance some of the proposals and projects that we have in train and plan to do to the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So we're happy to be here, and we do thank the committee for this opportunity.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Duke. I would like to ask Ms. Ria Ramdeen, our Chief Executive Officer at SWIMCOL, for her opening remarks.
Good afternoon once again. SWIMCOL is indeed thankful for the opportunity to participate in this virtual hearing on the impact of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago. SWIMCOL is very much cognizant of the impact of climate change, both locally and regionally, especially as we are a small island developing state. These impacts, as we know, can be more acute. SWIMCOL is happy to be part of the conversation on climate change and to be given the opportunity to share some of the initiatives to mitigating this global concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ramdeen, and for your opening remarks. And I'd like to ask Major General Rodney Smart for his opening remarks. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the ODPM.
Thank you very much, Chair. On behalf of the ODPM, allow me first to thank you and the committee members for your kind invitation for us to participate in these deliberations today. Please allow me at the onset to establish what the ODPM is for the benefit of the public, since at times there is an uncertainty between the ODPM and the local level disaster management offices. The ODPM, or the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, is a division of the Ministry of National Security, and as the National Strategic Disaster Management Office, it is a separate entity from the local level disaster management offices. The local level offices that I referred to are the disaster management units of the 14 municipal corporations under the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and the Tobago Emergency Management Agency, TEMA, under the Tobago House of Assembly. Hence, while the ODPM provides support to the local level offices, its main focus is on national requirements, and therefore it takes a comprehensive and not a response-centric approach to disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management. This approach emphasizes all aspects of the disaster management cycle, which in general includes disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery from all hazards and hazard enablers such as climate change. We draw a distinction between these two because climate change, while not a hazard in itself, results in impacts such as extreme weather conditions and sea level rise, which have led to increased damage and losses. The ODPM also is the nation's focal point to the international and regional disaster management community, and therefore, one of our other roles is to ensure the nation is compliant with the requirements of the various frameworks. These frameworks include, but are not limited to, CARICOM's Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Paris Agreement, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Embedded in these frameworks are climate change adaptation requirements, and to ensure these are mainstream into all sectors of society, with Cabinet's approval, the ODPM established the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee. This strategic vehicle comprises government ministries and agencies, and in the future, it would include other sectors of society, thereby providing Trinidad and Tobago with a greater opportunity to succeed at building climate resilience and, by extension, disaster resilience. I thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Major. Major General Smart. Major, I know is Major General retired, right? So in addressing you, is it okay?
Major General retired.
Yeah, is it okay to refer to you as Major General Smart? Or
sure, certainly it is.
Okay, thank you. We now go to Mr. Kelvin Ramsuk, our General Manager and T&Tech, and who is no stranger to this committee, Mr. Ramsuk.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members again, and the general public. So, Chairman and members, and we are happy to be here this afternoon. 2022 was a very... Yeah, sorry? Yeah, we are...
We're hearing you.
You're right. We are happy to be here this afternoon. 2022 was an extremely challenging year for us. We have had to adjust. Certainly, we did do some adjustments. Our primary aim is also always to provide the best response to our customers. And we did do a number of adjustments in 2022. And we are happy to be here to identify what we have done and what we plan to do in the future and some of the systems that we have put into place. Also, we are happy to listen to the others because we are always here to learn, to get new ideas with the end result of providing the best service to our customers. So thank you very much, Chairman and members. We are glad to be here, happy to be here, and happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ramsuk. We go to Mr. Ravindra Nanga, who's chairman of the Water and Sewage Authority.
Thank you, Mr. And we are, like everyone else, we're indeed very grateful for this opportunity to be a part of this committee. When we got your request last year, it allowed us to refocus our attention to this very important topic of climate change. In preparing our responses to the questions posed, it gave us an opportunity to reflect on the past. And as the general manager of TSF stated, we too at the authority had a very challenging year last year, more so during the month of November, when we were inundated with extreme rainfall, and it posed chaos with our operations in the east. While that highlighted the works that are necessary to mitigate against that, we did in fact start looking at mitigating factors prior, but that allowed the opportunity to place emphasis on the importance and the crucial aspect of taking steps to mitigate against the changes that are being caused due to climate change. That we are indeed grateful for this opportunity. It has caused us to refocus our efforts. Like the Permanent Secretary indicated, we have been developing systems and strategies to mitigate against the effects that we have been facing. And we are happy to share those with the committee as we have done in our written submission. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this very important committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman Nanga. And I'd like to ask Professor Michelle Michael to give opening remarks on behalf of the University of the West Indies. Professor Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I bring greetings on behalf of the academic community at the University of the West Indies. We would like to be able to make a meaningful contribution so as to inform decision-making that would be far more rigorous and robust based on the scientific work that we do at the university. Amongst the members of the committee who are part of the UE representation, we do have Dr. Rupnarayan, who specializes in disaster risk reduction and has done a lot of work on water as we continue to collaborate. There is Dr. Aidan Farrell, who is a climate change specialist working on the impact of climate change on food. And of course, there is a nexus between food and water availability. And there is Dr. Ricardo Clark, who is a physicist and has been working on data collection in respect of the meteorological data that is required to inform policy and decision-making as it pertains to land and physical infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. We now commence questioning by the committee. Just one or two little housekeeping guidelines. I'd just like to remind members and officials that if you could direct your questions and concerns through the chair. Also that to keep your microphones muted until recognized by the chair, and all present should please utilize the raise hand feature accordingly to enable you to participate in the questioning and discussion. Also that the viewing and listening public, you are invited to submit questions via Parliament's YouTube channel and social media platforms, and we will try our best to respond to those questions. I now open the floor to members of the committee to ask questions agreed, and I will call on, to lead us off, I'll call on our Vice Chairman, Ms. Lisa Morris-Julian, to start off the questioning.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, through you, I would like to guide my questions towards the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management. To Major General Rodney Smart, so you made it quite clear that there's a separation between local government, disaster response, as well as TEMA. But I am interested in finding out in what manner do you cooperate with these agencies? And let us use the example of natural disaster.
Thank you very much for your question, member. Through you, Chair. The ODPM has established very strong links with the local disaster management units. And from disaster prevention, I would have indicated prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Through all those stages of the disaster management cycle, we cooperate. So that while we are under different authorities, the ODPM recognized the need to ensure that in a joint approach, we treat with disaster situations, emergency crisis situations. So it is through that whole disaster management cycle. So if I can use as an example, the recent flooding events in October and November last year. Response is usually what we consider at a level 1, 2, or 3. In this case, it was a level 1 incident. And because it is a level 1 incident, the local agencies would respond to it. While they are responding, the ODPM is monitoring, is doing surveillance. In the event that the situation gets to the point where their resources are overwhelmed, and there is a need to get the ODPM involved with the management of whatever is taking place. If that happens, we call that a level 2 event. And at level 2, the ODPM gets very much involved in terms of planning, in terms of bringing in other national resources. And if, God forbid, the situation gets worse than that, where even the national resources become overwhelmed, then the ODPM, because it is the national focal point, will be the conduit for requests through CDIMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, the Caribbean approach, the regional approach, or through other agencies such as the United Nations. So it's a tiered approach, but through it all, there's collaboration, there's cooperation taking place. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chairman, to the ODPM once more. Your submission indicated that recently a mission from the Caribbean Development Bank commenced discussions with the ODPM and the Tobago Emergency Management Agency, TEMA, about the bank's interest in providing support for the eroding coastline in the vicinity of the Scarborough Secondary School, where a portion of the roadway has collapsed in the sea already. Can you give us an update, please?
Thank you very much for the question, member, and through you, Chair. Yes, the ODPM again has the national focal point. The bank wanting to offer grant funding to Trinidad and Tobago came through the ODPM being the National Disaster Office. But in addition to the ODPM, because the Ministry of Planning and Development has a role to play in such funding, it would have also collaborated with the bank. What has happened since is that a team from the Caribbean Development Bank visited Trinidad and Tobago, would have gone to Tobago, met with the Tobago House of Assembly, and arrangements are right now taking place between those two entities. So the ODPM was really the conduit for the team to come into Trinidad and Tobago and obtain the necessary contacts and information to allow them to do what they're doing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, Chairman, if I could continue. Your submission also indicated that supporting these reports, data collected by the ODPM over the past 10 years confirm an increasing number of flooding and landslide events In recent years, from 2017 to present, there has been a general increasing trend of flooding and landslide reports. Can you provide to us the details of the data collected over the past decade, year by year, which will confirm an increasing number of flooding and landslide events? Also, given the ODPM's observation that the number of flooding and landslide events are increasing, has the ODPM been preparing for such increases in these events? Could you please just give us details if so? And finally, has the ODPM requested additional funding based on the data in anticipation of increases in these particular events of landslides and flooding? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much again, member, and through you, Chair. I will ask Mr. Anwar Bash to speak to the first two, and I will speak with the third one. Mr. Bash.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, member. Through you, Chair, if I may respond. At this point in time, the ODPM we do have in existence a database with regards to data impacts or hazard impacts for Trinidad and Tobago. At present, I'm unable to give you year-by-year responses at this presentation, but I can endeavor to provide you with a written response with regards to the proper figures per year. But we have seen, based on our data trend with an analytical eye, that there is an increase based on hazard impacts. May I ask you, Chair, to kindly reiterate the second aspect of the preparedness question, please?
Sure, you, Chair. We're asking for details on how are you preparing for these increased landslides and flooding based on the data that you say that you collected over the past 10 years.
Thank you. And if I may respond through you, Chair, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction speaks to 4 priority areas. And in fact, the Sendai Framework is a global blueprint that sets for us priorities that should be achieved by 2030 that enables a resilient society. Priority 1 of the Sendai Framework focuses on understanding disaster risk. And as a result of this, following hazard impacts, the ODPM would usually go into communities. We would analyze the impacts, identify potential causes for these impacts in terms of floodings or landslides, and then we would identify strategies that can probably mitigate these impacts. These strategies, these impacts, and these issues that have been identified are usually developed into a report, which we will then provide as the coordinating agency to response agencies or agencies that we may think fitting for retrofitting or mitigative actions to be taken.
And Chair, through you, if I may continue on the same question, the ODPM does take a comprehensive approach to all that we do. And some of the things that we're doing is at the strategic, the operational, and at the tactical or community level. I think the member would be interested in some of the things at the community level. So let me place some emphasis there. At the community level, what we have been able to do is through the UNDP, we were able to get additional funding for phase 2 of a community flood early warning system program. And what this program focuses on is looking at 7 additional communities in partnership with the Water Resource Agency, who's really the main player, partnership with the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. And we were able to get the UNDP to agree to expand this program. So as it stands right now, the program is well on its way. In 7 additional communities in Trinidad and Tobago, there will be sensors, stream flow gauges, 2 in Tobago, 5 in Trinidad. And that is just one of the programs. There's a second program that we have ongoing as well. And this, through CIDIMA, but with assistance from the University of the West Indies, is the Caribbean Risk Information Tool. And what that tool is going to do, using PINA, DB, and ARUCA as pilot projects, what it is doing is to go into the community and look at the data over time and develop a risk score for the community that is going to help the Ministry of Rural Development and local government provide focus to where it needs to place emphasis. And a final one I would want to just emphasize is another project we are doing through SIDIMA. This one is in its very early stages. It's called the Resilient Action Plan. And it is under the Making Cities Resilient program of the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office. And what this program is, and it's a pilot we started in Tobago, looking at what are the risks that are prominent in Tobago, taking a multi-hazard approach, so with climate change as well, and developing an action plan, a resilient action plan. Once this project is completed, we will then look at it to see if we can bring the same approach to communities within Trinidad. So that way, through those three projects, we will be building resilience and helping our communities to become stronger against climate change and the other disaster risks that we are always prominent and we're very concerned about. I hope that answers the question, member.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, through you, I noticed in the submission that ODPM stated over 295,000 persons are susceptible to primary and secondary flooding annually. So through you, Chair, to Major General, in the event this happens, 295,000, what does ODPM have to say about that? What will there be a plan in this regard?
Major General, yeah, it refers specifically to the 5th paragraph on page 7 of your response.
Yes, sorry.
The question that the member is asking.
Thank you very much for the question, member. And through you, Chair, I just remembered as well, member, that I didn't answer your last question, which was about the funding.
Yes.
So if I could just answer that at the same time.
I thought you said you got funding from a certain agency. You said that earlier. It's not the same funding?
Right. Okay. So the ODPM receives funding through the annual budgetary allocation, and that is supplemented by funds that we receive on cabinet approval, of course, from international and regional agencies. So yes, the funding for us is always sufficient, but we always can do with some more. So I would say to you, yes, member, we can do with some more, but we make do with what we have. But with regard to the persons the 295,000 persons, fortunately for us in Trinidad and Tobago, so far, we have not had a disaster on such a scale, but we plan for it. And starting at the local level, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, as part of the National Response Framework, would first treat with those situations within their municipal corporation, and of course, TIMA in Tobago. So that's the first national response. First national response is at the local level. Should that be insufficient and should an appeal be made to the ODPM, here's where the ODPM gets together all the national agencies. So agencies such in this case here, we're talking about the Ministry of Housing, we're talking about the AGC, of course. How are we going to ensure that we can house those people? We're speaking about the Ministry of Community Development and Sport. How are we using the community centers, using churches, using schools? So that is the approach that one will take, because it has to be an all of society approach. And that is just from the public sector perspective. But the private sector is also part of the framework. And therefore, how do we feed these people? And here is where recently we've had this situation where a number of agencies, the ODPM would have appealed to provide assistance to those residents who would have been affected by the flooding incident. So just to emphasize that it is really an all-of-society approach that we would treat with this. But in the event that even this is insufficient, we then have the Caribbean support, the Caribbean disaster emergency management approach. Trinidad and Tobago, over the past 5 years, has been sending our troops, as well as persons from the Disaster Management Office, to assist other countries. If something like that should happen, I can assure you other countries will be here to assist us.
Chairman, I just have one question, but I do reserve the right to come back to ODPM. Your submission indicated that probably the time has come for a more concerted national effort to be placed on climate change, mitigation, and adaptation measures. Last sentence on page 9. Can you please elaborate on this lovely statement?
Thank you very much for the lovely question. Yes, and if I could say, through you, Chair, if I can say exactly what we are doing here today is a component of what we are speaking about. What your committee has done, and I heard it from one or two of the persons in their opening statements, what this committee has done, it has brought on all these agencies together, similar to what the ODPM has done with the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee. And all these committees, all these agencies now are focusing on climate change. And this is helping the ODPM as well. So one of the mechanisms is through committees such as yours. Another one, of course, is through that same multi-sectoral committee that the ODPM has gotten cabinet approval for. It is, for us, we recognize that through the leadership, and I emphasize the leadership of the Ministry of Planning and Development, which is the national focal point for climate change and climate change mitigation and adaptation in Trinidad and Tobago. Because they are the focal point, they will provide lead. So it is bringing our national agencies together, but not forgetting academia. We have UWI that is here with us. Recently, the ODPM signed, sorry, not the ODPM, recently the Ministry of National Security signed an MOU with the University of the West Indies because we recognize the importance of research and innovation coming out of the university. So that lovely statement we made is not just a statement because it sounds fine. It is because we recognize that unless you take this strategic, all-of-society approach, we will not defeat the challenges that we are facing with climate change. And it is through these mechanisms we see our country defeating what we're facing right now. I hope that answers the question, member.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Member Morris Julian. Major General, I'm glad to hear what you're saying about the multi-sectoral approach, because one of the things that all members of this committee and what is coming through thus far from our various inquiries for the hearings and the written submissions is the tremendous need that there is for that multi-sectoral coordination in order for us to effectively challenge the impact of climate change. Now, you did mention the Ministry of Planning and Development taking the lead role, but one of the things to bring to your attention as well from a practical point of view is a lot of the focus has been on mitigation measures. Understandably so, because of the many multilateral agreements that we have signed on to. And the adaptation measures, we are seeing a big gap there, and the need to accelerate with regards to particularly adaptation measures with regards to climate change. Now, Mr. Baksh, when he was giving his report, mentioned about reports being generated by the ODPM. So before we go to the member of Sagram 6 o'clock, what I would like to ask of the ODPM is that in your response, you mentioned about flooding events and landslide impacts and over a 10-year period. And in fact, you stated on page 6 of your response that in 2022 alone, your office received reports of 4,252 flooding events and 681 landslide impacts. Now, what I'm wondering is the integration of that data, not only from a point of view of collation and assessment by the ODPM, but what do you do with that data with regards to your stakeholders, the other stakeholders that are engaged? For instance, the flooding events and the landslide impacts that you have mentioned there. How much handover of that data or how much coordination was undertaken with, say, like the Ministry of Works and Transport? Maybe to a lesser extent, WASA, where their damage to their pipelines were involved, or the leaking pipelines were the cause of the landslides. That cross flow of information, outages with TNTech, all of these things. What sort of coordination is there? Other than the report, is the report just handed over to the different entities? Or is there follow-up to ensure that this wealth of information that the ODPM is collecting is being adequately transferred to the respective stakeholders for their analysis and action?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. And before I ask Mr. Bash to elaborate, allow me to say that when the ODPM collects the information is coming from the Ministry of Rural Development Disaster Management Unit. So it's coming from them, but it's also coming from TIMA in Tobago and from other resources as well. So it is not the ODPM information, it's the ODPM collecting the information based on what the reports we would have gotten from the communities. So I'll ask Mr. Bash to elaborate a bit.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Chair, for your question. Indeed, as your question relates to data sharing and data integration into other sectors, the ODPM began a pilot project, which is known as the Damage and Needs Assessment Digitization Methodologies. What this methodology allowed us to do is to have real-time, accurate information with regards to hazard impact. So it reduced the need for paper-based data collection and therefore improved the data collection needs and losses to Trinidad and Tobago with regards to hazard impact. This information is then transferred to our relevant agencies, in particular, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. We have introduced this project so that they can act quicker with regards to response for shock response and social protection. But it also allows us to better understand response that is required from, let's just say there's a need for an evacuation. We have more information and earlier information for immediate response and recovery initiative. So indeed, this data is shared with all our stakeholders. Once there is a request after the event occurs, if there is a request for data to allow for analysis to look at hotspots where events may happen, we do share those data for planning and developmental purposes. Thank you.
And if I can just add on to that, Chair, and what we do here at the ODPM as well, we would take that information and do some modeling as well, flood modeling, landslide susceptibility modeling, and that information is again shared, right? But again, I want to emphasize the beauty, the beauty of the multi-sectoral committee, because on that committee are members of the Ministry of Works and Transport. In fact, the acting director of drainage is a member of that committee. Similarly, they are members of the Ministry of Planning and a number of other agencies. And through this mechanism, information is received through them and information is shared as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bakshan, Major General. We'll move on. We'll come back to the ODPM. I'm sure members would have questions again for them. But before we go to member Sagrasan Suklal, Dr. Rupnarayan, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I could wait Senator Sargram Singh to complete before I go, if that is more.
No, is it, yeah, what you are asking?
It was for the ODPM, it were questions for the ODPM.
Okay, well, all right, we can take those questions or question and then we move on to Senator Sargram Singh.
All right, so through you, Chair, just a quick couple, points that I wanted to get some clarification on. In terms of the landslide and flood data that we collect, is it point source data? I would really like to understand how it is being collected, because the question was asked before. Is it that someone calls in and says there is a flood in a particular area? Because I know initially, back in 2010, 2012, when there is the initial susceptibility mapping for Trinidad, all they utilized for occurrence data was point sources. So there will be a point that is placed in terms of GPS coordinate on a particular street. So we did not have extent data, which is critical for mapping and modeling, etc. So that's the first thing, whether we have moved to the point of trying to collect extent data. The second thing is a general comment. I realized through my attendance to all these JSCs thus far that there's a heavy focus on flooding and landslides. While that may be current hazards, we are dealing with climate change and other aspects such as droughts. I have heard very little from the ministries or the various agencies as to what plans they have in place for something, for that eventuality, which is also something that is projected if we're dealing with climate change and infrastructure going forward. So just wanted to raise that particular point. And in terms of the assessments, we have done assessments. I could have told you guys 10 years ago that Penal Debe Regional Corporation was highly susceptible. So apart from the assessments, what are we doing towards adaptation and mitigation? So those are my contributions through you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dr. Rupnarayan. Major General, any comments on what Dr. Rupnarayan has asked before we move on?
Thank you very much.
I know a fair amount of it falls under the purview of the other entities who are here with us, but I'm asking if you have if you would like to add anything or respond in any way.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, we would want to respond briefly and ask Mr. Bash to begin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. Indeed, Dr. Ryan, the data that is now collected using the digitized platform is point data, but it's also entity data where we are collecting data from large-scale communities to allow proper mapping and hotspot and modeling, etc. So we are moving away from the point source data as a matter of fact.
And if I could add to that, I received very recently a request from that department, and the department is looking at moving beyond the point data, but the extent data, looking at the expansion of the flood, the depth, etc. And some equipment is being procured at this point in time for that sort of detailed data capture. With regard to the focus on flood and not drought, for example, the ODPM takes a multi-hazard approach to our work. So we try our best not to be pigeonholed, for example, and you would see it in our responses, where we kept saying that climate change is, yes, one, as a hazard enabler we must pay attention to, but we must also pay attention to all the other hazards, because the ODPM has to take a multi-hazard approach in the same way how we treat with issues from our all of society approach. So we are not just focused on flooding issues. In fact, just last week, the ODPM would have had an article in the newspaper, in all 3 daily newspapers, where we spoke about Trinidad and Tobago preparedness in the event of a seismic incident. And we would have informed the public of 14 projects that we are doing, not the ODPM, but with stakeholders. Because again, while some persons are focusing on flooding, the ODPM has to focus on all these other possibilities. And again, the importance of the multi-sectoral approach, which thankfully, when we took that idea to the Minister of National Security, he promoted it at the cabinet.
Okay, thank you very much, Major General. Dr. Rupner was specifically mentioned the issue of drought and climate adaptation measures to deal with drought. So we'll take that up later because we do have WASA and the Ministry of Public Utilities here with us. And it is one of the items that I think members had to take up as well. So I'll now ask our member Sagram Singh Sukula to ask the questions.
Chairman, thank you most sincerely for the opportunity. Chair, of course, as we continue the inquiry into various measures in place to address challenges of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago, I want to take the opportunity, of course, to congratulate the Ministry of Public Utilities on its intention to host the Caribbean Regional Conference Water Loss 2023, which is actually happening next week. And the theme of that conference is combating climate change through NRW reduction. And I think that's very timely given, this present JSC that we're in. I understand that in that particular conference, the intention will be for regional and state entities to discuss and explore best practices and new technology in water loss management. And I think we are certainly heading in the right direction as the government, of course, prepares to continue to treat with climate change. And I just wanted to congratulate, of course, the Ministry of Public Utilities for leading the charge in that regard. Now, it's against this backdrop, Chair, through you, I have some questions for WASA. Now, if I may respectfully take the representatives of the entity to submit to their submission 6 on page 5, where the authority submitted that the challenge, and this of course is for the benefit of the viewing public who would not have had the benefit of reading the submissions, Chair. So if I could just briefly state what the entity would have indicated in their submissions. The challenge of reduced water resources within several watersheds are being addressed through several initiatives, such as a water supply service adaptation plan, which was developed by a committee with members from the Water and Sewerage Authority, Water Resource Agency, the Ministry of Planning and Development, and the Ministry of Public Utility. My question, based on that submission, my question is, can WASA kindly indicate to the committee and of course to the benefit of the public, what is the status of that water supply service adaptation plan?
Mr. Nanga?
Yes, CEO. So through you, Chair, I'll answer your question, Honorable Member, that the status of the plan at this point in time is ongoing. It is in the state of discussion. I can't give you a percentage of completion, but I could bring that to the committee at another time in writing.
Certainly, I think it would be very prudent for us to have a look, of course, at that plan now. So you indicated that you're still in the planning and consultation stage. One can understand because, to establish a plan of that nature, I would imagine it would require a significant amount of consultation and discussions, correct?
Certainly, Member.
But it's fair to say that you all have started, and the discussion, before I preempt anything, it's safe to say that the conversations relative to this plan has begun, and it's in its planning stages. Because and the reason why I'm asking that is because had you all been forthcoming with the status of the plan, I would have wanted to ascertain from you perhaps what are some of the challenges you have faced in the I thought we were at the implementation stage of the plan, but I guess we are in the planning stage of the plan. But at this stage, would you be at all able to indicate to the committee? Yes, I know you all are having conversations and all of that, but would you be able to indicate to the committee perhaps what are some of the challenges you have? So yes, consultation is one, but what are some of the challenges that currently face WASA in being able to settle said plan?
Yeah. As you answer the question for the member, could you also indicate whether the plan is being done internally by WASA or whether you have engaged services or consultants for this plan, and also a time frame, if you could give to the committee? Thank you.
Chair, this is a collaborative effort, and there are some consultants on board. With regards to the timelines, I would not be able to say at this point in time a definitive timeline, but I can get back to the committee with regards to that.
Okay. Chair, can I continue? But surely you must have an aim and a purpose of the plan, right? What is the general I mean, I understand that it will take time, but I see this plan as critical in the conversation of water conservation, dealing with water loss, all of those things. But maybe I could be wrong. But for my benefit, and of course the benefits of the committee, would you be able to give us some general, the general direction that you envision, or what would be some of the key elements that this water supply service adaptation plan would be focused on?
Certainly, member, and as you would have indicated in your initially, with regards to the conference, it's directly related as well to non-revenue water management. And why the plan may stretch a bit is because of the inclusion of a non-revenue water approach. So what we believe is that once we manage the non-revenue water, we will benefit directly and indirectly with regards to climate change. Just to give an example, we are also working, we have representatives from Trinidad working with the International Water Association on a white paper, which is related to leakage emission, a leakage emission initiative, where while we have a water balance, we want to make a comparable carbon emission balance. So what we believe is that with every unit of water produced, we have an equivalent amount of carbon emissions. So,
correct.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, continue.
Yes. In addition, in addition to that, while we have that carbon emissions being produced with leakage, we have an additional carbon emissions when we go to repair the leak. So hence the reason the importance of including the non-revenue water approach in the plan.
And that is why I asked, because I was particularly intrigued when I saw this plan and was hoping that, of course, that approach would have been focal in the preparation of that plan. That's the non-revenue water reduction approach. So thank you. And then we do look forward. I would like, through you, Chair, if we could make ask the WASA in due time to provide us with, at least if not some timelines and just the status of, as we continue to put this plan in place. Chair, can I continue, right?
Yeah, sure.
If I may respectfully, Chair, take WASA to submission 7 on page 6. Again, the question was asked to describe the challenges faced by WASA in relation with disaster risk management, response coordination, and recovery operations in relation to disasters caused by climate change. Explain how these challenges are being addressed. And of course, I'm reading for the record and for the benefits of the listening public. Now, in submission 7, on page 7, the authority submitted that it needs to strengthen its supervisory control and data acquisition. I'm not sure if we just say SCADA or if there's a SCADA, I'm not too sure how to pronounce that. Networks to monitor and control widespread components and equipment. So that was the answer to that particular question. My question to Wasa is, what is the current SCADA system currently being used in the authority at this time?
But through you, Chair. So this is a SCADA. This is SCADA. So what SCADA is basically a control system, a data acquisition and control system. And we are actually building out our SCADA system in Wasa right now at the moment to properly manage and control our distribution and transmission network, inclusive of production.
How effective and efficient is SCADA when compared to other top leading SCADA software? I saw that there is something called Complicity and iFix and IndoSoft Web Studio. I would imagine this is an expensive system. I'm just thinking, but how effective is this particular system when compared to other software that is available? Just in the interest of ensuring that we're getting value for money relative to this system being used, because it plays a critical role, of course, in monitoring and so on. Management.
True, Chair. Thanks, Mama, again for the question. Well, our system is purpose fit, and we have different systems on the market, which would cost, in most instances, much more money based on the requirements that you would need. At this point in time, we don't see ourselves looking at any brand name, so to speak, or specific brands of SCADA, but we continue to build on what we have. It works for us, and it is purpose fit.
Mr. Roman, could I just ask how long has Wasa been trying to implement this SCADA? And how long would it take to get an optimal point of performance of this software and familiarity with the staff at Wasa to ensure that it contributes to your operations effectively?
Sure. So, Chair, to answer your question, I am confident that we have trained staff. We have been using the SCADA system for quite a number of years. It is just to scale it. So primarily we have SCADA at our major production plants, water treatment plants, and we intend to roll it out, to scale it on our transmission and distribution systems so that we can have more control. A control system means that you will have more optimization and efficiency taking place.
And Chairman, if I can interject at this point as well. Currently, as we speak, there's a pilot project going on at our North Oropouche water treatment plant, where we had a foreign consultant visit about a month and a half ago, Xylem Corporation, who specializes in SCADA systems. And we have been implementing a SCADA system at North Oropouche. That has already started to pay tremendous benefits. And as the CEO indicated, we are hoping to expand that through our distribution system. And one of the immediate benefits, and it assisted us in our preparation for dealing with repeats of what occurred in November last year with flooding. One of the immediate benefits we saw is that we started to measure the output coming out from North Oropouche, and we measured the flow at various points, and that allowed us to discover very huge leaks in our pipeline system. And in that part of the country, the pipeline system runs through the forest, so it's not easily accessible. But because of the system that we're in the process of implementing, we were able to discover a very huge leak within the forest system that took quite some time to repair. That was successfully repaired. We also was able to pick up a leak that was occurring in the river along the highway. That would not have been very easy to pick up for the simple reason it was an underground pipe system flowing through the river. And the point of the leak was actually flowing into the river, so you would not have actually seen a leak. But because of that system that we are implementing in North Oropouche, we were able to isolate that leak, discover it, and do repairs in a timely manner. So that the system that we are putting out as well will be assisting us in our operation and control of the non-revenue water.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you, Chair, because that is exactly what I wanted to find out with respect to the operational parts of the system. If I may respectfully take WASA to page 8 of your submissions, in which you were asked by the committee, describe the role of the authority in relation to mitigating the impact of climate change. And on page 8, the authority submitted the Integrated Water Resource Management Policy 2022 provides guidelines to ensure sustainability of this valuable resource, and the Office of the Water Resource Management will also be established independent of WASA and following consultation with the recognized majority union. The WRA will be integrated and morphed under this OWRM umbrella. Is it possible at all for the authority to give us a status update or inform us of the status of this policy? And has it been implemented just yet?
All right, the policy has been approved by Cabinet. I believe it was in November of last year. Next week, we'll be having the water loss conference, the Regional and International Water Loss Conference. And on the last day of that conference, this policy will be launched by the Honorable Minister of Public Utilities. Following that, it will be implemented. It's not to say that we have not started implementation of certain parts of the policy, because the policy is all embracing. But the formal launch will take place at the conclusion of that water loss conference next week. And thereafter, there will be a specialized implementation of this policy.
And that is why I started by commending highly the Ministry of Public Utilities. And I'm glad to know that at least, well, to my mind, that answers my question relative to the status. We have a launch of that particular policy at the last date, according to you, correct, of this conference. So I'm happy to know that. Additionally, in that submission, would you be able, that you would have made, that I made reference to earlier, what is the status with regard to the establishment of the Office of the Water Resource Management,
All right, I know the Ministry of Public Utilities is currently exploring the structure of that new water resource management office. What has occurred is that WRA, the Water Resource Agency, was within WASA. WRA is really a regulatory entity. It is supposed to be a regulatory entity, and of course you can understand that whereas it's supposed to be regulating WASA, it is not. It falls under WASA, so you can see the difficulties in that system. So that coming out of this policy, the Ministry of Public Utilities saw the benefit of separating that entity, and rather than simply separating the entity, creating this Office of Water Resource Management. So that currently, and I'm subject to correction by the Permanent Secretary, they are now looking at the ideal structure for that entity. On our end at WASA, we are in the process of implementing the transformation plan, and part of that transformation plan includes the removal of WRA from the authority based on best practice and into the Public Utilities Ministry. So that from WASA's end, we have shortlisted industrial relations consultants who are working together with us, as well as our transformation office, to work on a comprehensive transformation plan that will be used as the roadmap to consult with the unions, because that will mean that the WRA will cease to exist in the authority and it will be transferred, so to speak, to the Ministry of Public Utilities. So there are some industrial relations concerns that we are currently dealing with, and that is in the final stages of being implemented. Very shortly, we would choose that IR consultant to work on the consultation package so that we can come to the table with the unions to have meaningful consultation prior to implementing that aspect of the transformation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Nanga. Member, as we on the topic of the integrated water resource management policy, I think maybe I would like to ask Ms. Duke, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Public Utilities, to come in just to respond to your question for completeness. Ms. Duke, would you care to comment at this stage on particularly the question asked by the member for the formation of the Water Resources Agency, separation from WASA and all of those things?
Thank you for the opportunity, Chairman and member. So just for completeness, as you said, Chairman mentioned certain aspects that WASA is working on as regards the separation of the WRA from WASA. And in terms of the establishment of the Office of Water Resource Management, we at the MPU have established a working group which comprises of specially selected in-house technocrats along with representation from WASA. And we are currently working on the strategy, institutional and legislative aspects of setting up that Office of Water Resource Management. In regard of the legislative aspects, as you would expect, we are working along with the legislative drafting department of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs to begin the process of drafting a water resources management bill that will align with the policy. So that's where we are at this stage.
Yeah, thank you very much, Permanent Secretary. I return to our member.
And that is so important because I think, just especially for the understanding of the public, I heard Chairman Nanga, of course, and of course UPS speaking to the administrative structures that has to be put into place in order to establish the water resource management. But PS, respectfully, in your submission, you spoke about the legislation and the intention of that bill, and I think that to my mind will play a critical role if we are to take this question and make it more aligned with what the purpose of this inquiry is, which is into the various measures in place to address challenges of climate change. So that being said, with respect to the water resource management, the creation of that and that entity, for want of a better word, and this is a question really for the benefit of the public. What benefits do you see we would be able to derive from the establishment of such an entity as it relates to climate change in Trinidad and Tobago?
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Sure.
To the member. Okay, so the policy recognizes the importance of adapting a climate change and variability approach, particularly in protecting water resources, and speaks to the formulation of strategies to manage water resources. Earlier, the colleague, Major General from ODPN, was talking about the multi-sectoral approach. I believe at previous appearances before the JSCs, we would have discussed the need to have a multi-sectoral approach to management of our critical resources, and water, of course, being a prime one of these resources. If I should just share, the policy includes goals, objectives of water resource management, principles which would guide the policies, priority for the allocation of water, issues and implementation for a wide array of applications such as land use planning, water resource assessment, abstraction, licensing, designating uses of water bodies. So to answer you, member, because this is a multi-sectoral approach, it ensures that we bring all the key agencies and all the key communities to bear on the issue of the equitable supply of water, the availability of water, the resilience of water, as we seek to manage water for the benefit of the citizenry.
Of course, through you, Chair, that speaks volumes to, of course, the Ministry of Public Utility and the part that you are playing. The ministry is playing to address, of course, the challenges faced by climate change in Trinidad and Tobago. Chair, through you, if I may direct another question to Wasa. It's on page 8 of answer to submission 9. Page 8, submission 9 in WASA's submission. And again, Chair, through you, for the benefit of the public, the question was asked, what is being done by the authority to mitigate the impact on climate change on water resources? And at submission 9, the authority submitted that WASA recently received approval for a loan operation with the IDB. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is about to undertake a series of initiatives that will build WASA's resilience to climate change impacts. Some of the projects identified, and there were 7 projects identified. One, for example, a construction of 8 modular water treatment plants, increased drilling of groundwater wells to combat the effects of water, the creation of a smart water network, and there are seven. I wish I could go into all for the benefit of the public, but just so the public understand, there are 7 areas that was mentioned in that submission. Now, my question is relative to that submission made on page 8 in WASA submission 9. What are the respective statuses as it relates to A to G of the authority's submission with respect to that loan and all of that? Has there been any traction in starting projects relative to the 7 projects or teams projects that we focus on, through this funding?
Mr. Nanga, we are back to you.
Yes, thank you. The loan would have been signed, I believe it was last week, the loan would have been signed. There are certain prerequisites that we are required to satisfy before the loans, the proceeds of the loan will be disbursed. We're in the process of doing that, and we are hopeful that within the next 2 weeks, funding will be released. In terms of these projects starting on the ground, no, they have not started yet on the ground because we are awaiting the funds. However, we have completed on WASA's end, we have completed the tender packages because being an IDB loan, there are stringent measures that we are expected to follow in terms of tendering, and we have to follow the IDB rules. So we have developed, these projects that have been identified, we have developed the tender packages within WASA, and that should go to the IDB for non-objection by the end of this week, following which it will come back to WASA for approval by the board, and then the invitations to tender will go out for those various packages. However, in terms of the construction of the 8 modular water treatment plants, we actually, in respect of one of those in the Ravine Sub area, we have been working on that for quite some time. We are in a partnership with UTT, who is assisting us with doing feasibility studies. So that although we have not hit the ground as yet in terms of breaking ground, the preparatory works have taken place. The increase in drilling of groundwater, in addition to the additional projects that have been identified under the IDB project, WASA, as part of this PSIP, has been engaging in an expanded water well rehabilitation and drilling, so that independent of the IDB loan, we have been increasing our well intakes to combat the effects of climate change. Creation of a smart water network, as I indicated earlier on that North Oropuch pilot project, that is the beginning of the smart water network system. In addition to that, as part of our leak repair program, we now have a dashboard based on software that existed within the authority, a dashboard that is also part of our smart network system that allows us to manage the repair status. The rehabilitation of the major plants, again, work has been ongoing with that, and that will be assisting us in putting together the packages for non-objection by the IDB. Increase with resilient pipelines. At our very last board meeting, we had a contractor that is very experienced in HDPE technology do a presentation for us in conjunction with what is referred to as directional drilling, which would allow us, you may have seen in the press last week or earlier this week, that the authority has released a list of pipe replacement projects that would be ongoing based on, for example, the shifting lands where we are using steel pipes, PVC pipes that will be susceptible to fracture based on the slippage of land. This HDPE pipe, while it's not a very new technology, it has been in existence around, it is new technology for us. It will be more resilient to those areas where you have land slippage occurring. The HDPE pipes are a bit more flexible so that it can withstand that type of movement. Continuing our leak management strategy, we have been doing that, but of course, with the additional funding coming in from the IDB, that will be expanded and initiate a robust NWR program. Again, we have been doing that, but with the additional funding coming in from the IDB, all these programs will be ramped up with specific reference to the projects that have been identified under the IDB loan package.
Thank you very much, Chairman Nanga, for that explanation. So I understand you're waiting on the funding. Of course, one would reasonably understand that, of course, there's a process before you have the disbursement of said funds. And I am particularly pleased as a member of this committee, and more so as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, that notwithstanding the fact that you all are waiting on the disbursement of the funds, that at least WAS is already ahead of the game in the sense that you all have started putting mechanisms in place, structures in place, plans are being built out so that once monies are disbursed, you can then breathe life into these 7 projects, which to my mind, Chair, I believe respectfully is critical. And of course, it will speak to WASA's contribution and the part that WASA would play in this whole climate change, dealing with climate change and so on. Chairman, can I continue? Chair, I can give way to another.
No, well, no, we'll come back to you, Member Sagram Singh Suklal, but I'll just ask Member De Nobrega has a question to ask. So I'll invite him at this time, and then we'll come back to you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Member Sagram Singh Suklal, I will be your intermission. Chair, through you to the Ministry of Public Utilities and or WASA. All the data that we have seen thus far obviously indicates that there are higher volumes of rainfall being experienced globally, and Trinidad and Tobago is no different. We are being impacted by that. The impact of that higher rainfall was, of course, reflected in the ODPM's report and their reference to increased numbers of landslides and increased instances of flooding. As we look at mitigating the impact of climate control, I'm just wondering what WASA MPU is doing proactively. What plans you guys have that are either in train or being implemented at this stage to harvest, to store, to use these increasing volumes of rainfall, either before or after they enter the various sources of groundwater?
Right. First of all, thank you for that question, member. And again, flowing from what we learned of the experiences we had in November last year, following on from the answer that I gave to member Sagar Singh Suklal, one of the problems we faced with the flooding is that in the east, in the eastern part of the country, where we rely heavily on surface water, with the increased flooding came increased turbidity. And as I indicated, when we recognized that as a serious problem that we were facing, we looked at mitigating factors. And one of the mitigating factors was the development of a system of wells together with modular water treatment plants so that we can shift reliance and dependence on surface water. So that once we have the groundwater coming up through the wells, with the use of modular water treatment plants, we can decentralize or localize the supply of water so that that would mitigate against the high impact of flooding that we experienced last year. With the use of the HDPE pipes as well, our lines, our steel lines, which are aged and are susceptible to fracture, with the use of HDPE pipes, we can mitigate against those fractures, again, from shifting lands. We have been collaborating with the NGC, and they have technology where they monitor Earth movements, so that we are hoping to enter into a comprehensive cooperation agreement with them, where we can benefit from that technology, so that it would allow us to do preventative maintenance and to take steps. In fact, in the presentation that I referred to with the HDPE pipes, the company that was doing it referenced some mitigating factors that they undertook in the United States, where there was soil erosion that was threatening a major pipeline supply. And instead of waiting for the disaster to happen, they used the directional drilling. They went under the river, installed the HDPE pipes, and waited for the collapse of that pipe, so that once that pipe collapsed, within a matter of hours, they would have rerouted the supply into the HDPE pipe system, so as to avoid a disaster. Had it not been for that, when that pipe collapsed, and they could not prevent it from collapsing, that would have led to major disruption. In respect of harvesting the water, the Ministry of Public Utilities they have developed a rainwater harvesting program where we are encouraging members of the public, more so in the rural areas, that at this time do not have a reliable supply, to utilize the harvesting of rainwater. I also referenced the Ravin Saab project that we have been looking at as one of the areas for the modular water treatment plant. They also experienced problems with flooding, so that part of our works there would include a dam to trap that water so that it can be fed into the modular treatment plant to increase our capacity. And in so doing, it would help to mitigate against the hazards of flooding in that area. So that we are looking at inventive and innovative ways of utilizing the excessive rainfall to our advantage. Thank you, member.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Nanga. So before we get back to members of the committee, I just see Member Ibrahim also has some questions he would like to ask as well. Yeah, Member Sagram Singh Suklal has to continue with some questions as well. But I see Professor Michael has a hand up, so I'll ask her this time to make
Thank
a
you. Thank you,
contribution.
Chair. Thank you. I want to commend my WASA colleagues for giving us a very explicit update on what is being done to address the water issues in the country. As a climate change specialist working on the Small Islands chapter for IPCC, we noted that there is going to be drought being experienced in the Caribbean over the next 10 to 15 years. So when in that context, we note that roughly 40 to 50% of our water is being lost due to pipeline leakage or because of customers who are not on the WASA's database, it is obviously a deep concern for us that if we are facing drought and we have these high levels of water loss, what proactive measures are being used? So the attempts to have a suite of projects that deal with pipeline replacement is commendable. Of course, in listening, I recognize that the engineering solutions and the innovative technologies are being used. I did hear about rainwater harvesting, particularly in rural areas. But I am wondering, apart from engineering solutions, whether there are other economic instruments that can be used for water demand management. I would be very interested in learning because Dr. Rupnarayan and I have done a lot of research on water demand management and water resources management. And I am particularly keen on finding out if other instruments, economic instruments, are being considered to curb excessive water consumption, and especially given the droughts that we will be facing in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Chairman Nanga, any response?
Certainly. All right. Before I answer the last question posed, you raised an issue of for want of a better word, the theft of water. And you may have seen over the last few months that we have offered an amnesty so that we are in the process of updating our customer cadastre. One of the problems we have would be the illegal connections. Another problem we face would be wrongly categorized connections. So for example, when you apply for a connection for the first time, you will get a garden tap. And once you complete your construction, you are to come in and upgrade your account to, for example, a residential account, which has not happened. So that we are in the process of updating, firstly, our customer cadastre. And secondly, we are in the process of doing a sanitation of all our connections. The purpose behind the amnesty that we have offered and we continue to offer is that we really don't want, given the importance of a water supply, we really did not want to simply go about as a first resort to disconnect persons. So we are giving them the opportunity to regularize their system. So that in that regard, we will be doing a comprehensive sweep of the country and updating our customer cadastre. With respect to the demand management, we have embarked on a metering system. Right now, all new commercial customers are being metered, so that once you have metering, that would lead to some form of control because of the relatively low rates. And in fact, we have one of the lowest rates in the Caribbean, if not in the world. Persons are not attuned to water conservation. I want to commend the Ministry of Education in that regard, as well as our public education department. They have been doing some work in terms of raising awareness of water conservation. But in addition to that, once we have metering and a component that we're looking at, not simply metering, but smart metering, that will assist us in addressing the demand for water, because once you are now being asked to pay for the water that you consume, it will cause persons to look at the amount of water that they demand on the system. Additionally, and again, this has to do with non-revenue water, our system currently is not automated. One of the things that we are looking at as part of the smart water network system is to put pressure sensors on our network. And what that will do, for example, is when you have a drop in the demand in areas, the pressure sensors will pick that up and it will reduce our pumps at the booster stations, for example, so that you would have less water entering into the system. Another problem that we face in scheduling is that when you turn on the system at full pressure, we do not have adequate or efficient managing of pressure control, which is being done manually. It causes fractures on our aged infrastructure, so that by adopting a smart water system where all those functions will now be controlled remotely and automatically, we will have a reduction in the supply that goes out there during peak periods, as well as when you have a lower demand for a water supply.
Thank you very much, Chairman Nanga. As it was mentioned, in terms of drought, I think Professor Michael mentioned about predictions for prolonged drought in the Caribbean. Does WASA has a drought management plan? Not just one dry season, one bad dry season, but prolonged drought. Have you been addressing the issue of prolonged drought, and is there a drought management plan? Because also the Ministry of Public Utilities, in their response to question 12, under the PSIP initiatives, mentioned a water supply drought management plan. And I don't know if it's integrated with what you are looking at, but would you please advise regarding your drought management plan?
And if I can turn over to Mr. Mead.
Chair, yes, we recently concluded a consultancy on a drought management plan for Trinidad and Tobago. And that plan, out of that plan, the recommendations, there are several recommendations, including the establishment of a drought management committee, which will be multi-sectorial, and also looks at measuring, continuous measuring, so that we are tracking whether a drought will occur, and the measures that should be put in place for those eventualities. The plan also looks at several issues, curtailment, curtailing demand at times of drought, allocating the resource to users that may be given priority. So it's a very comprehensive plan that involves all of the various agencies that are that have something to do with the management of water.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Would it be possible for you all to supply this committee with a copy of that drought management plan?
Certainly, sure. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rupnarine, see you have had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I think halfway through the response from WASA, they would have answered my question with respect to metering. And I note that in the response, it was said that the metering would focus on commercial. And I just want to take it a little bit further, because as it stands, maybe just about 3 or 4% of our domestic population is metered. Therefore, it's very hard to understand consumer behavior from the domestic side. And the challenge is, even recently, doing some research, we were able to look at consumption during the COVID period to see if there was any impacts on the various sectors for both Trinidad and Barbados. And Barbados had smart metering, and their categories were a little bit better defined than ours, because we had an issue where I saw domestic consumption dropped during COVID, and I was most confused. We had no way of explaining it until it was brought to my attention that schools were categorized as domestic, which explained the reason why that level was a little bit lower. So the question is really, are we planning to institute smart metering at a domestic level? And at the same time, I also want to commend WASA for some of the things or the initiatives that were just identified, because a lot of these things from an academic perspective, we have been talking about for quite some time. And it's really very pleasing to see plans are in place to start the implementation of these things. So Chair, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Nanga, with regards to metering, it has been on WASA's agenda now probably for the past, well, to be generous, the past probably 3 decades or so. And we on this committee, we really want to wish this relatively new board of WASA and the management of WASA, we really want to wish you all a lot of success with the intended metering that you are looking at, because we're talking not only of domestic, but bulk metering. It's all tied in with NRW and everything. So we are really looking forward to some definitive in the ground installations with regards to metering, because as I said, the talk has been around for so long. Almost every time we meet, it's about metering and getting metering done. But hopefully, no need to respond. I'm just conveying, our sentiments that we really hope that we will be able to get this thing off the ground in a substantive way. So
if I can have just the opportunity to answer and address Dr. Ryan's concern. And I apologize if I gave the impression that we are really only looking at the commercial customers. No, it's not that at all. We do intend to meter everyone, but we have been in the market for the meters, smart meters, as the chairman has indicated. But because of the supply chain issues that emanated from COVID, we were having difficulties in sourcing a sufficient number of satisfactory meters. We did get a certain amount, and the decision was taken at the level of the board to utilize that with the commercial customers, which are smaller in number than the domestic customers. What we are doing in terms of getting onto the domestic customers, we are also looking at rate recoveries, so that where we have earmarked customers, and we do this as a last resort, where we have earmarked customers, domestic customers, that is, for disconnection. Right now, it is extremely expensive to do a disconnection and a reconnection. It is, in fact, uneconomical to do so. So that where we have earmarked domestic customers for disconnection, what we propose to do is we propose to install one of the smart meters that we have that will allow us the opportunity to disconnect remotely without the need for digging up to find the source, so that as far as the domestic customers are concerned, we are tapping it from that perspective. And once we get sufficient meters, of course, what we are doing with commercial customers will be expanded across the board to domestic customers as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nanga. As you say, best of luck. We return to Member Sagram Singh Sukla.
Chair, I'm just pleased that you asked the question concerning drought, because that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask. And I know you would have asked WASA to submit to us our drought plan, especially in light of submissions made by Prof. Maiku that suggests that perhaps within the next 10 to 15 years, we would be facing severe drought in Trinidad. I mean, Chair, by that time I will only be 50, and I would not want to live in a country in which we have, where we have to face such travesty. So I'm happy that you would have raised that question, but also linked to the point of drought, and was not drought, but is of course water supply. The question that I had for WASA was relative to submission 3 on page 3 of their submissions. The question was asked, describe the impact of sea level rise on freshwater sources. what is being done to protect freshwater sources from rising sea levels, given that it has the potential to increase the salinity level of freshwater sources. So here we are hearing that within 10 to 15 years, we could be faced with severe drought because of climate change. And then we have a depletion, of course, because of climate change. We can have a depletion or further depletion of our freshwater sources. Now, in response to that question, the authority stated in order to protect our freshwater sources, robust monitoring is being implemented together with the execution of the Integrated Water Resource Management Policy and the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Policy Plan. My simple question, Chair, through you is, would the authority be able to give us a status on that implementation process, that plan? The implementation process, sorry, as it relates to, protecting our freshwater sources, and how effective have this process proven thus far, of course, again, in protecting our freshwater sources? And that's the extent of my questions, Chair.
Yeah, Nanga.
Again, I would ask Mr. Mead to answer that question.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. We are extremely concerned about the possible impact or the predicted impact of rises in sea level, and particularly on our aquifers that we refer to as coastal aquifers. And these aquifers will exist in areas such as Mayaro, also in the west. And so these aquifers are particularly at risk to saltwater intrusion, increases in salinity due to sea level rise. What then are we doing to mitigate this? Well, we mentioned, of course, monitoring is critical to be able to know what is happening in our aquifers and to be able to prepare for that. The other area that is critical would be how do we manage the environment, that's the surrounding land. Because basically, really, the aquifers are recharged, and they're recharged in areas that are many times far removed from where the abstraction is taking place. And these areas, which we refer to as recharge areas, these must be protected. The more we can increase recharge, is the more we'll be able to reduce the risk of not being able to utilize those aquifers. So we are focusing on monitoring, that's one. And secondly, we are focusing on what do we do to ensure that we do not lose recharge areas. Because if we lose recharge areas, then we are liable to lose those aquifers. And of course, this requires, as we said before, a multi-sectorial approach, which is, has been emphasized in the Integrated Water Resources Management Policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we move to Member Ibrahim, but before Member Ibrahim asks his question, just Mr. Nanga, very quickly, a member of the public asks a question as to what sort of time frame you have for the overall or phased installations of the smart meters, particularly the domestic smart meters.
And the way I would answer that would be as soon as we are able to procure a sufficient amount. But in terms of 100% coverage, we are looking from immediate to 10 years to cover everyone in the country.
Okay, thank you, Member Abira.
Thank you, Chair. Chairman Nanga, through you, Chair. When it comes to climate change and we're facing higher levels of precipitation, many things, for want of a better word, would flow from this, being overfilling, sedimentation, damage to water plants and water treatment areas.
And also what comes from that is a greater need for repair for these plants and equipment to protect our water sources. Can you comment on any steps taken to, one, repair what you reported on for 2022 with the higher levels of precipitation and runoff, which caused damage to plant and equipment? And in addition to which, what mitigating steps are being put in place, not just for this year, but down the line, to protect our reserve and our treated water? If I may interject, just one last question there. Flooding brings about the possibility of waterborne contamination and disease spread by water. How is WASA in treating our water resources and the chemicals stockpiling and intends to deal with contamination of water on a biological level?
Thank you for that question, member. And what we have been looking at is methods of controlling the turbidity that comes down with the increased precipitation. While we were looking for solutions, we discovered within the authority, there was a report done by a Singapore company about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, the recommendations were not implemented, and it was with specific reference to the Caroni water treatment plant. And what was suggested was the construction of retention ponds just upstream from the intakes, so that the water would go in there, there would be settlement, and then the purified water would be fed into the water treatment plant for treatment. So that is something we are now looking at. Unfortunately, by the time we discovered that report, our budget was exhausted, so that coming in the new fiscal year, that is something that we'll be looking at. In terms of Caroni, we would try to replicate that at North Orapooch as well. Those are the two main plants that are affected by turbidity. Recently, we met with one of our stakeholders, Toshiba, who is doing work with us, and they also promised to assist us in terms of the technology and controlling how you manage turbidity given the increased precipitation, so that we are looking at innovative measures with the assistance of our stakeholder partners in terms of managing that. In addition to the problem with that we face with respect to the increased precipitation, we are also having a problem with the illegal quarrying, and we are engaging the Ministry of Energy. Of course, as members may appreciate, that aspect of illegal quarrying, it is a very dangerous field, and we are concerned about the safety of our personnel, so that we are limited in terms of what we can do with respect to that. So that we are looking, or we will be approaching the Ministry of Energy to assist us, as well as National Security, to assist us in mitigating against the effects of the illegal quarrying, which increases turbidity. With respect to the waterborne illnesses and the stockpiling of chemicals, yes, we have developed a system where currently we have a 6-month cover in respect of chemicals for the purposes of treating water. In terms of ensuring that we do not get waterborne illnesses, we regularly test the quality of that water, so that we ensure that dangerous levels of bacteria are not found in the final product. As part of our transformation as well, in terms of looking at the modular water treatment plants, we are also exploring different methods of water treatment, so that we would be able to control costs as well. But in terms of the stockpiling of chemicals, number one, we have identified multiple sources of chemicals, so we are no longer reliant on one supplier, as well as we have stocked at least 6 months cover. And in the event something goes awry, we have even sourced the supply out of Jamaica. So let us assume something goes wrong with our local supply. Within a few days, we can arrange for a supply of chemicals to be brought in from Jamaica, so that we are confident. When we came in as a board, there were issues that we found with supply and storage, and we have developed policies and procedures to address that. And we are confident and we are comfortable that we have a sufficient stockpile of chemicals right now, 6 months cover, to allow us to meet any demand that we may have. And that includes because based on increased precipitation.
Thank you, Mr. Nanga. Yeah, Member Ibrahim.
As a follow-up question, and I would like to also include this to the ODPM or any other organization that would like to respond. What we see happening after any type of localized disaster is, from water especially, from flooding especially, is that water cannot reach that area quick enough. And it's a rock and a hard place because more water has caused the issue. But the question is for health and life. What is the plan, or is there a plan from the ODPM or to WASA for either localized areas? I appreciate what you stated when it came to stockpiling of chemicals to treat, but there's always going to be a lag between a natural disaster and reaching, especially bordered by excessive rainfall and flooding and rise of sea waters and whatnot. There's always that lag between water, the disaster, and proper supply of potable water, or semi-potable for the purpose of even washing down areas and making spaces more livable. Is there a plan for some level of stockpiling of water? Lo and behold, something major might happen for disaster management when it comes to providing potable water for the purpose of survival, not just for cleaning and maintenance, but for health to affected citizens.
All right. Unfortunately, again, going back to November last year, precisely remember the scenario that you explained happened. So flooding, our plants fell. Flooding prevented us from accessing those plants to effect repairs. It also prevented us from putting in truck-borne supplies, and we had to await the subsiding of the floodwaters to offer mitigating factors to residents. Part of our medium to long-term plan to address that problem is with the reliance on wells as well as the modular water treatment plants, where you will have a localized supply of fresh water, so that the intention is, and given our experience, the intention would be to build and to outfit those wells to be weather resistant. And when I say weather resistant, where it will stand minimum impact from the effects of weather. So that, for example, if the traditional water treatment plants relying on surface water goes down, we would now be able to rely on the wells as well as the modular water treatment plants to continue providing reliable supply of water to those affected residents. Our aim is to ensure, based on our projects with the well development and the modular water treatment plants, our aim is to reach a place where we will not be affected by the effects of the increased precipitation. So that in planning, that is something that we would be looking and addressing in putting our plants down on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nanga. Member Ibrahim also, I think as part of his question was referring to particularly community storage at community levels. Now, I know you say your modular plants and your wells is going to address, the challenges, but surely the authority, is the authority looking at enhancing storage at community levels? particularly in the interim where you have all these surface sources, these plants that are dependent on surface water, affected when you have a heavy shower of rain, it gets muddy and everything. You have to shut down for 2 and 3 days. But remember, Ibrahim was asking, he used the term stockpiling, but in terms of community storage that can see you through 2 and 3 days for dedicated communities where you have all these small plants located, is the authority giving consideration to that?
I think I can ask the CEO to address that question.
Thank you, Chair. So just to answer your question, yes, we are embarking on various projects in terms of the construction of service reservoirs at different locations, primarily on the northern side of the country, because of the same issue, and also to modify our hydraulic system. Now, primarily with severe flooding, we have severe flooding and weather conditions. We have either 3 of these issues, either power outages, high turbidity plants, or broken lines. And in terms of mitigating factors, with regards to that, we would have generators on the water treatment plants. As Chairman would have said, with regards to the high turbidity, we have modular plants to deal with the higher turbidity, because the current plants don't deal with the higher turbidity. And with the breakage of the lines, typically in landslip prone areas, the Chairman would have also spoken about the use of HEP pipes. So we are addressing these issues, and we are looking at specific areas based on the trending data.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Romain. We have 2 entities with us that we haven't engaged in our deliberations as yet. We have officials from TNTEC here with us, and we have officials from SwimCall. So I'd like to shift the discussions to these 2 entities. But before I do so, I see Dr. Ruparain, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. We'll try to ask less questions the next time around. Quick stuff, concern is that we are currently looking at wastewater reuse. There's just been a new standard that was put forward by the TTBS that was done in collaboration with us at UE, as well as the Ministry of Public Utilities, WASA, and so on. And I was wondering if in the context of drought, if we are starting to look at increasing the uptake of treated wastewater for various purposes, and if there are any plans in place. And in addition to that, there are lots of private package plants that have been abandoned because of that ambiguous sort of relationship as in terms of who maintains these plants. Has that issue been addressed, or is it something that they're looking to address going forward? So that's it, Chair. Through you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Nanga, briefly, if you can enlighten us on wastewater reuse.
Certainly. We are not at all considering that at the level of a domestic supply or even a commercial supply. What we are currently looking at would be, for example, agricultural purposes. And what we're also considering would be, for example, on the Point Lisas Industrial Estate to free up potable water. We may consider that in the future, but for now, the wastewater would be limited to agricultural purposes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we'd like to get SwimCall and TNTEC involved in the deliberation. So maybe with SwimCall, I would like to ask a question of SwimCall. In your responses to the committee, you highlighted the challenge that is posed by disaster debris. And you indicated to us that disaster debris, if not carefully managed within the municipalities, can inundate the landfills, as these landfills do not have the capacity to accept unsorted disaster debris. And you went on to point out that in localized flooding or localized disasters, Forest Park and Beetham landfills prepared designated areas on the handling of disaster debris in order to prevent indiscriminate dumping. In the whole context that Beetham, with the proposed engineered landfill coming up at Forest Park, Beetham, the intention to close off Beetham, and the near capacity of all the landfills, how critical is this challenge of debris, disaster debris? Mr. Ramdin?
I'll hand over through you, Chair, to our General Manager, QHSC.
Good afternoon, everyone. Through you, Chair. Okay, so disaster debris in general is a concern, all things being equal, all things not being equal at swim call. And in the country with waste, as everybody knows, is fully ventilated. All landfills are at capacity, and we are moving towards the engineered landfill. So we do have space, we do have capacity for until we are geared to start that engineered landfill. However, studies have shown, and the ODPM is here with us, so they can elaborate. The last study with ODPM would have indicated that a significant disaster would generate debris that the landfills we are unable to take care of at the landfills. So that's a given. However, there is, together with the ODPM, a disaster debris management plan has been crafted. This is led by the ODPM, and in general, what it speaks to, again, is a localized approach, where, and that actually is a practical and best practice all over the world, in fact, because in a disaster, the debris that is generated, you need to remove that debris as fast as possible to clear roadways and so forth, so that you can have access to aid and whatever. So the plan in general, and again, my colleagues at ODPM can elaborate, but the plan in general will say that it indicates that the debris be dealt with in a localized through the municipalities, sorted and so forth, and then the residual amount of waste will come to the landfills. The landfills do have the capacity right now to deal with a small amount of that waste. Then let's say something happened tomorrow then. And we do have designated areas, but it has to work. It can work with that plan implemented. So with figures and with the plan, because we had to do an assessment prior to that plan, it did indicate that the landfills are unable to take a disaster debris if a significant disaster occurs.
Okay, thank you very much. But you see, it begs the question that are the local municipalities, the localized bodies, are they equipped to handle the debris, the disaster debris, dispose of that debris efficiently? Do they have the sites to accommodate that debris? Because we know swim call is limited, as you have indicated, in terms of accepting that debris. You did mention some degree of sorting of that debris prior to it reaching the landfill. But it begs the question that the localized bodies, particularly the corporations, the municipalities, do they have that capacity to handle this debris arising out of disasters? Maybe we get the views of swim call, or if not, we can probably ask ODPM, what are the views on this?
Chair, through you will be put to ODPM for response.
Yeah, okay, Major General.
Sure, thanks very much, Chair. And the ODPM, and thanks for the reference from SwimCon. So the ODPM would have done a workshop where we would have developed debris management plan. I will ask Mr. Bash to speak in more detail to it.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Chair, for the question. The debris, it's a draft debris management plan that we developed for the municipality of Port of Spain at this point in time as a pilot, coming out of an earthquake plan that earthquake assessment that we did for Port of Spain. The plan ideally identifies logistics as to who is responsible for transportation of the debris from the sites to localized sites for initial sorting, for classification, for upcycling, recycling, and then for those that are required to go to the final landfill sites. So indeed, we have looked at it from the municipal corporation level, and therefore we are working to extend this project eventually to other municipal corporations.
Yeah, Mr. Baksham, thank you for your response. Would it be possible to provide the committee with some details of this? Because you say, like, when you use the term localized sites, it raises questions as to the availability of those sites, the suitability of those sites, whether they are in existence, whether the operations of the municipalities cover those sites. With regards to the volume of debris that is going to go there for sorting and all of these things. So the committee would like some further information regarding this aspect. Yeah. Professor Michael, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was reflecting on the question about collection of debris in the post-disaster period. But I wanted to pose the question, from my knowledge, there is scientific evidence that it is this wanton disposal of solid waste into our watercourses that in fact may be contributing to the flooding. Not maybe, we are aware the science is there. So while the question, the conversation has revolved around collection of debris in the post-disaster, and I'm aware of all the public health ramifications of that. I think that the discussion needs to be broadened to encompass the issue of solid waste management in terms of how households are disposing of their waste and actually contributing to the disaster, in this case, flooding. There's another question that I want to put on the back end of that, and it is whether SWIMCOL perhaps is coordinating with the regional corporations and having a far more systematic collection program. And this applies particularly to informal settlements, which are in very difficult terrain and where garbage trucks simply cannot access these areas. So people actually bring their waste down to a collection point, or they dispose of it in river courses and so on. I think that question has to do with whether there is some collaboration and systematic program where there is a regular or appointed dates for collection, and if people are aware that these are the dates that the collection will take place. And the third question, a lot of the siting of the landfill sites, they are actually in locations, and because they're huge, you're looking for areas where you're not where land is available and not as expensive. But the point is that where they're sited may be far removed from the catchment areas of settlements. So there is a huge distance between the settlements and the landfill site, which costs households more to dispose of their waste because they have to pay the truck drivers and so on. So I'm wondering if there is a plan that demarcates these, the siting of these waste disposal sites. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Michael. What I'll do, I'd like to let you know that SWIMCOL did appear before this Joint Select Committee. We had a separate inquiry into the landfills issue with SWIMCOL. It was probably about September of last year. And a lot of what you are asking falls within the matters that were taken up with SWIMCOL. Actually, during that particular inquiry, you know, you and all the members of the listening and viewing public, and anyone interested can access that inquiry report on our Parliament channel, because I think it adequately addresses, you know, a lot of what you have raised there regarding the broader aspects of the solid waste collection and disposal, particularly in regards to the landfills. So I would refer everyone to that inquiry that was done by this JSC, and ask you to access that report there. We would like to get TNTech engaged in the discussion before we move off SWIMCOL. In your response to the impact of climate change, you indicated in response to question 1 that SWIMCOL is looking at anticipation of higher ambient air temperatures that would impact on the collection and handling of solid waste disposal and treatment at the landfills. Would you care to elaborate on this in terms of higher ambient air temperatures and the impact and the challenges it would bring, and how you are looking at dealing with this challenge?
So through you, Chair, again. To you. The higher ambient air temperatures with regards to collection of waste, higher ambient air temperatures impacts on the degradation of the waste. So we would anticipate that waste degradation may increase, and therefore the collection frequency may also have to increase. So it's a consideration in the future to consider the collection frequency and maybe the routes of collection. How we are addressing that right now? Well, SWIMCOL is not really directly involved in the collection of waste, of municipal waste. That falls under the Ministry of Local Government through the municipalities. However, we do interface with and collaborate with that stakeholder intimately, because they use the landfills, and so that conversation has not been broached as yet with regards to this particular risk. So that's an explanation of the possible impact of higher temperatures on the collection service.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And as we move on, we have a question from the public here, from a member of the public. They were listening into the discussion about the disaster debris, and they particularly wanted to find out the composition of the disaster debris. And for our persons at UWI who are with us, is the University of the West Indies doing any research or providing any advice with regards to, determining what is the best use or reuse of such material coming out of disaster debris, or generally reuse? So SWIMCOL first, and then we'll probably ask Professor Michael.
Afternoon again, Chair. So the composition, if I recall, the composition of the disaster debris may have been, I said may, and we can provide the information for you if so. It would have been assessed, part of the assessment of that disaster debris management plan, because obviously you've got to assess the type of debris that you're dealing with before you manage it. So it may be in that report. And so if that is so, we will provide, we can request of ODPM to provide it for you, which you already would have requested.
Okay, thank you. Professor Michael, is there any research that has been done into use of materials coming out of
I'm not certain.
recycling? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'm uncertain. I would have to check with my colleagues in the Department of Civil Engineering. I know they do have research projects done by graduate students on solid waste management as to whether they are doing a recycling of the actual products, especially, for example, plastics, which is a hot topic. I would need to ascertain that from my colleagues in civil engineering.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Yeah, I go now to.
Chair, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
From our end, we are looking at, in collaboration with SwimCall, we are indeed looking at waste. There was a waste mapping exercise that was done with respect to organic waste too, which, I mean, it's not really debris from disasters, but you will have lots of agricultural lands being destroyed, etc., vegetable waste and so on. So you're looking at that as a as a protein source. This is a very outlandish project, but we're looking at taking the organic waste and using it as a substrate for rearing insects and utilizing the insect larva as a protein substitute for livestock feed. So it's something that is very interesting. It will come on board soon. And I think there's also some discussion on collection of some organic waste for composting. So that's another angle to it as well. So just wanted to add that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. O'Brien, for your interjection. It's interesting stuff. So now we go to Tea and Tech. I ask member Maurice Julian to start the questioning.
Thank you, Chair. Tea and Tech. Your submission indicated that abnormal wind and rains caused damage and extended power outages on largely the overhead transmission and distribution systems. Do we have any data can you provide the data, the number of outages attributed to abnormal wind and rain in the past 5 years? Because I often hear that something tripped the grid. This is the first time I'm seeing that it's wind and rain. Is that information available?
Yes. So good afternoon again to members. Members, just permit me to say one item before we go into that. So again, I didn't get the opportunity to apologize for that outage last year, right? And in February 16th. And the reason why I'm saying this is that we are about to complete this second line, which is absolutely critical when we looked at the risk and what one of the major issues that we could have avoided that outage. And that line is expected, that second line, just for the nation, is expected to be completed at the end of next month. So once that is completed, we expect at least that level of risk to be significantly reduced for an island-wide outage, given that the majority of capacity is taken from the TGU power plant. To swing quickly into your question, and then I'll put you on the...
Mr. Ramsu, before you go on, I mean, you said next month for this second circuit from Union to Gandhi.
Yes, sir.
Is that fully commissioned and operational and everything?
70 of the 73 tower foundations are completed. 67 towers are all erected. The towers have all been erected. The majority of towers, we are 85% completed. We are moving very quickly, and we expect to complete at the end of next month.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Right. So we have data that we have been looking at our outages. We did see, we always, a couple of things we do at TNTech when we look at the risk and we look at monitoring and, of course, the business continuity plan. What are the factors? We have to look at what we could prevent. What are the things we could do to prevent? And after we, of course, once you have to make adjustments, and then you have to look down the road, what are some of the new things that you could do given the impactive nature of some of the issues with the climate conditions. So over the last 5 years, we have been looking at the impact of the climate. I will have to dissect the issue of the wind. I know you spoke about that, and we have seen outages, the number of outages, our count started from 9,958 in 2018. In 2022, 9,282. So we've been monitoring the outages over the last number of years, and in the event of wind, we have had a total of a number of outages related to adverse weather I'm seeing, and these are major outages. I'm seeing over the last 5 years, 82 major outages that would have occurred due to adverse weather. So what happens when you have high winds is that you have the effect of the lines clashing. And of course, when the lines clash, the circuits are going to trip. Remember, we spaced these lines so that, so they are adequately spaced to avoid that situation. Now, the question could be asked, well, why was it appropriately spaced? Yes, we have followed the standards and we have maintained the standards in terms of some of these situations. Given the significant amount of changes with climate now, especially wind, the issue of flooding, landslides, and so on, that has started to impact our grid in a very significant way. Chairman, I don't know if you could permit me, while I'm saying this, just to share the screen to show you some of the issues. It might be wise to look and see at some of the issues we have been having, especially because of landslips. I just have about 5 different pics. Quickly, I could just show you if you permit me.
Yeah, I think it would, the listening and, well, at least if you're in public, would be very much interested.
Right, so I'm going to share the screen quickly and I'll.
We need to issue permission from our end here, so we're checking with the broadcasting technician.
Oh, okay, but let me continue. So just to point out, so good, just to answer the question, I have to dissect the data, but we have it in terms of the wind, in terms of the issue of, we have it, as I said, I indicated 82. In terms of lightning, we have 189 major incidents over the last 5 years, and that one is becoming more predominant over 2022, moving into 2023.
Yeah, Mr. Ramsuk, you have permission to share screen now.
Sure, no problem.
You can try.
Through your chair, Mr. Ramsuk, it'll be interesting if we could get the data from the 5 years previously so we could do a comparison, please.
Sure, no problem with that. So I take it you're seeing the screen, right? So this is this screen.
No, we're not seeing your screen yet.
Not seeing it as yet. Okay, 1 second. Let's see how I can share here. Share sound. It's not allowing me. I'm not seeing share being highlighted. No, I did it. No, it's not allowing. Yeah. It's not allowing. It's still not allowing me to share.
All right, we give the co-host from this end, but we still seem to be getting some problems with it.
Okay, I'm getting through. Okay, good. Let's go. Let's see if we can do this. Right. So I take it you all are seeing some of the issues now with regards to landslip. Are you seeing the issues of?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. Then we had another incident occurring at Debe, right? So it's all over Caratal and Gasparilla, Debe. You can see the effect of the landslip there. You also have the Faizabad, Penal Faizabad. Look at the impact of the landslip. Now, the point is these circuits have been there for years and they have traverse areas that we constantly monitor. In fact, on our system, we have 12 drones. We have our individual, so we utilize the drone technology as much as possible. And of course, we have our physical visit to these various sites. But despite all of that, of course, you have the issue of landslips and flooding and extensive rainfall that are impactive on the system. Now, the reason why I'm raising this issue is because when you have a tower, we had 8 situations in 2022. When you have a tower failing, it is quite a significant amount of work to restore service. While we would have had a redundancy in the system, a tower failing means that you have to now do an extensive amount of work to bypass that tower to be able to pick up back the rest of the grid. Of course, this is just basically showing some of the issues that we have had in 2022. Having said that, we have done a number of things. One of the key items that we are doing right now is we are acquiring, it's in the final stage of acquisition. We've gone through the process. We have already gone through the tendering procedure and so on. And we are about to make an award to acquire 6 40-meter emergency towers. And that will, and those towers, that arrangement will allow us to easily install these towers with the minimum amount of civil works, so that when you have these situations, that we could at least respond quickly to either restore service or restore our redundancy arrangement. That is one of the major issues that we have been having in 2020. We had in 2022, and it seems to be very impactful as we move along into 2023. So why I'm raising the issue is the fact that one of the things that we have to look at very closely when it comes to disaster management is how are we going to be able to manage the grid in terms of, one, analyzing first whatever action we have to take to prevent the occurrence, and of course, if there is a disaster, what next? That's one of the challenges that we are having, because of course we have to acquire enough poles, transformers, conductors, insulators, because where we are positioned to get spares is not going to happen overnight. And as a result of that, the Commission have been looking at that very closely and doing whatever is necessary to acquire the necessary infrastructure. And just to point out, of course, one of the key things there is cost. And, you know, like anything else, we're making every effort to do what is necessary to be able to meet that commitment. So that's one issue regarding the issue of climate control and the issue of what has happened basically in 2022 into 2023. We have monitored our issues of vegetation management, and we are dealing with that issue. That's with fallen trees and so on. We are dealing with that issue. In fact, we have installed over 60 kilometers of covered conductors. But I want to move you across to Mr. Bell, because I know there'll be questions. The Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Bell, was on leave. He has been called out. Chief Technical Officer, he is really dealing with all these issues. So I suppose the additional question related to this can be fielded to him, and I will, of course, take what is necessary.
Okay, yes, Mr. Bell, could you please stop the screen
Yes,
sharing?
yes, I'll stop. Right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the panel committee, and to all viewing members and other members from other organizations.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chairman. I think the next question I would have for them, Mr. Benjamin will be best able to answer it. And I just want to thank Mr. Ramsuk for the visual aids, because I really had to see it to believe it. Although I believed you the last time too. So in the submission, it was indicated in 2022, there were numerous transmission and distribution infrastructure where diversions and reconstruction of same were required to maintain reliability and security to the electric grid. This will be the response to question 1, third bullet on page 1. Can you provide the status of the reconstruction works completed and about to be completed on the diversions affected in the year 2022? And also, can you indicate other transmission lines being closely monitored?
Okay, right. So concerning the transmission system that was affected by the landslips, and that is what resulted in diversion. The BCDB number 1 and 2, those are on both circuits are on the same tower, going along the route. So the portion where in Carter, where we had the problem, that was completed roughly about a month after the land slippage was identified. On the Pinal, Faizabad, Pinal, Otahiti, similarly, that too was completed. The Rio Claro, Mearo, that would have been a pool compared to the other two, which were tower circuits. So that too was completed. And the Harmony Hall, Mayo, that too was completed. So we would have, on the Pinto Malabar, we would have done some work. We did not divert the lines there. We would have done some work to stabilize the soil around the poles to make sure that the poles remain stable to perform their function. And the BC Gandhi, number 1 and 2, We stayed along the same route there, but we installed some poles to secure the conductors, and we moved them from the broken tower. So all those works were completed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, with your mic, you're coming across a bit muffled, but I think we gathered a fair amount of information from what you said, but if you could provide us in writing, the committee, with the details that you outlined there regarding the status of the restorative works.
Chairman, just to mention, all the situations were resolved. All the situations that we had were resolved.
Through you, Chairman. So, Mr. Ramsu, can you just, I know you spoke about it briefly, but can you tell us the measures that were taken to improve TNTEC's transmission and distribution infrastructure, as well as the precautionary measures described in your response that are being implemented?
Right. So with regards to, I'm going to focus mainly on the climate-related issues.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Our analysis, as I said, would have highlighted a number of key items that we have measured and monitored to see, in fact, how much outages were created by these scenarios. As I said, fallen trees, and we have been dealing with that issue in a significant way. One, we have been very careful that we don't cut too many trees, but we will still have to do tree cutting. I mean, a tree itself averages about 25 kilograms of carbon dioxide emission annually. So it's important that, that's another factor we have to be mindful of as we do our management in terms of tree clearing and so on. So that's one. The issue with the covered conductors seems to be becoming more predominant. In other words, we're running these covered conductors through the trees, and therefore there's no need to clear the trees in a number of cases. And each area have embarked in quite a significant manner in terms of dealing with that particular situation. As I said, we would have averaged around 60 kilometers of conductors when it comes to installation at this time, and that project is ongoing. The issue of the landslides, we continue to monitor. It's very difficult to relocate infrastructure and very costly. So, of course, whenever we monitor and we detect, we take action. But the idea is, of course, as we continue to get data and look at the areas that are more predominant to this issue, certainly we focus a lot more in those locations. Now, just to mention, there are one or two situations we were impacted by some illegal quarrying also, and that impacted one of our lines in quite a significant way. So that's one of the items that I guess we have to continue to hammer across to the relevant agencies in terms of that continued monitoring. So that would take care of and as I indicated, in the case of those failures that you would have seen, we quickly moved these at 40 meter, 120 feet towers that we are acquiring. In the event that we have now, the first step, as I say, is to prevent. So we monitor. Wherever we go, as Mr. Bell rightly said, we do remedial work. The civil department moves in, they do what is necessary. We utilize our 12 drones, we utilize the manpower resources, and we monitor those locations. In addition to that, we are acquiring these emergency towers that we feel could be installed within a week or so with the necessary technology and training, because when a tower fails, quite a significant area will be impacted. And when that happens, it is not an easy solution. In the one or two occasions, we would have had almost, it would have taken us several weeks to months. Fortunately, we had the redundancy option, and therefore we were able to run on one leg, but that in itself has its risk. On the other side, we have the issue of the flooding. But what we are doing, Chairman, we have started to look at those areas where we would have had the flooding, and we have taken a decision to do the maintenance as best as we can in quite a more significant manner, focus a lot more on those areas so that when you have the flooding, when it's difficult to access these areas, at least we will expect that they will be, the areas themselves will remain on supply, right, and be less impacted. So that's one of the factors that we are monitoring, and we are well aware of a number of areas that are regular areas, and therefore we are actually focusing on those areas to conduct whatever repairs we have to do. So the first step really is to prevent and to do what is necessary. Mr. Bell would tell you that a team went to Florida Power and Light about 2 months ago, and one of the key items there was to learn and how to deal with some of the disaster issues, and therefore upon their return, a number of things have started to be implemented. How we harden the system further, those are key things that our chairman, Mr. Thomas, has impacted on us to make sure that we continue to look at very closely. So in the case of the flooding, while really some of the issues are civil related, wherever I can relocate the infrastructure, I try to do that, but bear in mind that is costly. But in parallel to that, of course, we actually do the maintenance so that when it's impacted and we can't access it, then certainly at least the supply can remain on. And of course, we have acquired an amphibious vehicle, which we are very proud of, that works well, just to let everyone know, that works well. In fact, we have seen it in service upon testing it. And the minister has indicated that he has given us the all clear to acquire a second unit. That amphibious vehicle is going to be one of the major. We have started to use it, and it's a major item that we have to be able to respond to areas that are affected by flood where you could not access, where we could isolate and we could bring back part of the supply quickly and other parts of the supply, so that sometimes larger areas go off that we are unable to access to segment the circuits. We are now able to do that. So that is the issue with flooding. And of course, in parallel to that, we are looking at a lot more automation. We have started it. We have done 1 or 2 automation projects where the grid recognizes which sections of circuits have failed, automatically isolate those sections of circuit and restore the unfaulted section. So we have started to look at that aspect of things also. Lightning protection, I want to switch over to Mr. Bell back again. That is where we're getting a lot of leaks. That is the one that we are getting a lot of troubles with. In fact, I can tell you, we have the records that show we have monitored over the last 5 years, and that has significantly increased over the last 5 years. And in 2022, I could tell you, we had a number of situations in 2020, in fact, 63 major events in 2022 compared to 2021, 25. In 2022, 63 major lightning events. But I'll let Mr. Bell take it from there in terms of what we are doing with regards to that, because that is impacted on the system. Yes, we have lightning protection, but at the end of the day, despite all that you could do, the level and the intensity of these lightning is in fact affecting us in quite a significant way. Mr. Bell?
Yeah. So are you all hearing me clearer now?
Yes, we are. Thanks.
Okay, right. So concerning lightning protection, which, as Mr. Ramsuk said, we identified as one of the major causes of faults on the system, TNTech proceeded to acquire a software called Visala that allows us to look at the country, Trinidad and Tobago, and see where we are having most of the lightning strikes. And with that piece of information now, we are going to the circuits that supply those areas, and we are using the guidelines out of the IEEE 1410 standard for lightning protection. And we will be installing more lightning arresters on the circuit to reduce faults due to lightning. A second part of that lightning protection is we looked at the insulators that we are using. We recognize that there is one brand of insulator that we use in the past that is causing us a lot of the problems, because what they call the critical flashover value on those insulators were low. We have revised the spec, and we are trying to acquire, I think it's 100,000 insulators so that we can start to get those off the system also, so that we can reduce the impact of lightning causing outages. Together with the automation that Mr. Ramsuk spoke of, where we will be doing something like 60 of these circuits this year by putting in what we call the ring tie, so that we can have circuits, defaulted section isolated and put circuits fed from other circuits to keep those customers on the unfaulted section on supply. So together with those things, we expect that during this year, we will have less of an impact due to the lightning. This would be the first year we are starting the program to this level. So by next year, we should have ramped it up enough to have a really significant reduction in outages due to lightning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell.
Through you, Chairman, thank you very much, Mr. Bell and Mr. Ramsuk. You seem to anticipate the questions on flooding, but I still have questions on flooding that I would like to get answered, please. Your submission indicated storms and associated flooding caused damage to the substation equipment, resulting in decreased operational efficiency and availability. As it pertains to Bamboo in particular, where we saw the amphibian vehicle at work, right? The substation confirmed whether recent flooding events experienced in 2022 impacted the substation. And also, has the Commission raised the concern of flooding impacts on its substations with other government agencies? And if so, who?
Right, so I'll take the last part first. So we have raised the issue with the Ministry of Works, and we have been getting a lot of support from the Ministry of Works. The thing about a number of our substations, when we get land, it usually tends to be it tends to end up near rivers and those types of locations. That's where they are. I guess, land is critical, and usually that's what happens when we end up with locations that are given to us for substation. Notwithstanding that, let me point out that yes, we have had a number of issues with substation. Harmony Hall, I'll come back to Bamboo. Harmony Hall has been totally flooded in 2022, but recognizing that over the past years, we dealt with that properly by raising the equipment higher, the key equipment above ground. In parallel to that, we have installed pumps, and we have a gate. We have installed gate, right? A gate locking mechanism to prevent the water from entry into the substation. That's Harmony Hall. We have been impacted at Point Lisas, at M5000, at Central Substation, and also at Bamboo Substation. Fortunately, because of the land span at Bamboo Substation, while the water while the water itself came up to a certain amount of level, it did not impact the station in a major way. But we are looking at it. A discussion is taking place with our little retention pond, and we are looking at that location very closely. Of course, in the locations that I've spoken about, Central, Harmony Hall, Point Lisas, M5000, we have pumps, right? And we have mechanisms where we have dealt with the perimeter of the substation, and that we can close off the front gate, right, to prevent water ingress. Notwithstanding all of that, when you look at the level of water, well, it's easily said and done. When you look at the level of water, it's a sea out there, right? So the main aim is to move that water just from the substation into the rest of the sea, basically into the rest of the areas, just to get it out of the substation.
So, through you, Chairman, this is why you need another amphibious vehicle, correct? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramsuk, for your responses. And in fact, in your what you were outlining, you did preclude some of the questions that were coming at you, sorry. So your experience speaks well. So thanks very much for the information that you have volunteered. One final question though, before we wrap up, and I will be asking for closing comments from the chief official present from each of the entity. One final question is on the opposite side, the impact of high temperatures, high ambient temperatures, with the climate change impact. We are definitely going to be experiencing increased temperatures and also increased temperatures for prolonged periods of time, probably extended dry seasons and all of those things in the years to come. The impact on TNTEC's infrastructure, particularly your transmission system And what steps are you looking at to implement to meet these challenges?
So the high temperatures are very impactful on the generation in terms of the efficiency. And therefore, once you have higher temperatures, the machines are not going to be as efficient and they're going to burn more gas. So it is going to cost more when that situation occurs. In parallel to that, the demand on the grid increases because you then have air conditioned units, you have a number of things happening in there that creates a bigger demand on the grid. Equally important is that you have to look at your overhead lines and your conductors and the impact of that higher temperature in terms of the dissipation of the heating energy on those overhead infrastructure. And that includes your cable, some of it may have to be derated.
Yeah, Mr. Ramsuk, we lost you there for a short while.
Right, that also impacts.
You mentioned derated.
Right, I spoke about the cables. So our cables are designed with a certain ambient temperature and a certain temperature profile. Once that temperature profile changes, it means the current carrying capacity of the cables are going to change. It means the current carrying capacity of the cables are going to change. And therefore, that is going to impact on our ability to deliver the service to our customers. Of course, I'm just saying that in the sense that we have recognized those issues and we are dealing with it in terms of what we have to do to make sure that we avoid these scenarios, whether it means installing additional cables, whether it means looking at how we deal with the whole issue of the duration. Of course, the whole issue of renewable energy is also coming into play, and what we can do, right, to be able to avoid some of these situations, both now and of course in the future. Chairman, I don't know if you could permit me, once you're satisfied with this answer, I just want to...
Yeah.
I wanted Mr. Francois to just give a little insight. You see that disaster preparedness, I need to make sure it's clearly highlighted, because if we run into a problem in the country, the question is, what next? And that is in terms of whether you have a storm or a hurricane that hits this country. And I mean, there were a number of near misses, and I think it's important to understand where we are, what we are doing, and how impactful it is to us at TNTech.
Hello, with Mr. Francois.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee. So over the years, we found that the increase in the adverse weather conditions over the last 5 years has been, last year was probably the worst year in terms of the amount of adverse weather conditions that we've had and damages to the system. So we're realizing that due to climate change, it will continue to happen, and we require a number of disaster preparedness stock to cater for worst case scenarios. So we are looking at, at some point in time, we will be impacted by a hurricane, and because of where we sit, getting material quickly would be a challenge. So we now have to put systems in place to acquire and stockpile materials in the event of a serious situation, so that we can restore power to the population in a timely manner. We are looking at roughly about 15 to 20% of the system being impacted if we get a direct hit. And therefore, we are looking to acquire stocks of poles, transformers, conductors, insulators, to cater for that kind of situation. Don't want to say eventuality, but that kind of situation we need to cater for. All right. We have, in fact, initiated orders from the majority of those materials, but it's extremely expensive. And, we are looking, obviously, at getting PSIP support in terms of acquiring those materials, but it is roughly between $290 to $300 million we're looking at to acquire the requisite disaster preparedness stock, so that we can, in fact, mitigate the long-term impact of any situation that we will be faced with.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Francois and Mr. Ramsuk. We appreciate very much that that update there. I mean, the amount of monies that you mentioned there is a very substantial amount of money. And if it is to be funded through the PSIP, in terms of allocations, I'm not sure whether the challenges would be met by the PSIP, but I think we would have to definitely look at whatever mechanisms are there in order to meet that requirement, because you did mention that is just for keep about 20% of the grid. Yeah. Thanks very much for that, for your analysis. Mr. Ramsuk, as we close, one thing for TNTech. I know you mentioned about the towers and the 10 towers and all of those things for landslip situations, emergency replacements. But has the authority considered engaging maybe the services of consultants or collaborating with the Ministry of Works and Transport to undertake a risk assessment, vulnerability analysis with regards to your most susceptible, what you consider to be the areas that are most susceptible to landslips based on the experience you're having, so that we can you can look at it a bit in advance from a risk assessment and vulnerability point of view?
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, so it will impact really on those circuits that will impact the country quite a significant way, where you have less redundancy. So we have started to have some discussion with the Ministry of Work, but that is only preliminary. And therefore, yes, sir, I would have to pursue that a little more vigorously. Okay, thank you. So we'll have to bring this hearing to an end. We have gone into a lot of extra time, as we say. And but before we do, I think it's very important that we have our closing remarks, brief closing remarks from the respective entities who are here with us, because those remarks also form part of what is being discussed, and we do take guidance from the respective entities regarding these remarks. So I would ask Ms. Duke, our Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Public Utilities, for her closing remarks.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to say thank you to the committee, as well as all of the partners and stakeholders and colleagues gathered here. From our discussions today, we realize that we have a great responsibility on our shoulders to ensure that in the face of this phenomenon we call climate change, that we organize ourselves and implement those measures that would redound to efficiency, protecting the integrity of our systems and the resilience of the services we provide for posterity. And so our commitment at the Ministry of Public Utilities is to continue to engage with our stakeholders and ministries and agencies to really be able to implement on the measures that we have shared with you here today. So we thank you for the opportunity. We look forward to the report and also to continued collaboration with our colleagues and partners here, including at academia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duke. We go to Ms. Ria Ramdeen, Chief Executive Officer at SWIMCORP.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, I give way to Director Jabari Jacob, who would proffer closing remarks on behalf of SWIMCORP this afternoon.
So thank you, Ms. Ramdeen, to the committee, Chairman, and all other stakeholders here. We would like to say that through the continued support of the Ministry of Public Utilities, all of our internal and external stakeholders, we remain extremely committed towards achieving and executing our mandate, as well as our strategic initiatives and objectives as well as our community participation and our community involvement towards the promotion of strategies that we currently believe would mitigate and curb the effects of climate change thoroughly. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for having us here today, and we look forward to the report. Thank you again to the chairman, to the committee, and to all other stakeholders that are present here today.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jacob, and thanks to the swim goal team. We move to Major General Rodney Smart, our Chief Executive Officer at the ODPM.
Thank you very much. I just have one request. Chair?
Yeah, please.
Yes,
please.
Chair. I was saying that I have one request. It is an initiative that we have, that we feel that the committee would be interested in hearing about. It would take us 30 seconds to speak about it, and then I'll give my shortened closing remarks. With your
sure.
Thank you very much. Ms. Speakers, please.
Sure, thank you. Chair, so every May, we have National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Month, which allows for heightened awareness in relation to disaster preparedness and climate change adaptation. We must understand that it's a system. So we need to have prepared individuals, prepared families, prepared communities, and then a prepared nation. We want to just make a call to all of the agencies and companies who will be willing to partner with us for us to spread a disaster preparedness message, and that I'd continue to advocate for climate change adaptation programs to come on board, because we can do it together. Only together we can really build a prepared nation.
And thank you very much, Chair. And we think, we really enjoy being part of this session today. So on behalf of the ODPM, I express our thanks, our gratitude for the invitation that you extended to us to allow us to be part of these deliberations and the opportunity to elucidate our roles and responsibilities in building a national disaster risk reduction and management and climate change adaptation capabilities with all our partners. The ODPM is a coordinated agency, and all that we have been able to achieve on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, it is through our partners. So in the spirit of the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee, we endeavor to continue to work and collaborate with all the agencies, and we wholeheartedly embrace an all-society approach. Climate change is the major challenge of this generation, and it is therefore all our responsibility to meet this challenge and to ensure the future of our nation is secure. Thank you once again. It was our pleasure being part of these deliberations.
Thank you, Major General. I now ask Mr. Ramsuk for his closing remarks.
I'll ask Mr. Bob to do it, sir, but I just want to say thanks to all of us for all the efforts during the periods where we occasion. But Mr. Bob will do closing remarks.
So good evening all, Mr. Chairman. I would like to say that on behalf of the Commission, we are indeed happy for the opportunity here to be part of the conversation, to be part of this inquiry in connection with addressing the challenges of climate change. We know climate change has a significant effect on the electrical infrastructure, and we are looking intently at it. We are looking at mitigating measures, and we are going to ensure that we maintain the reliable supply to the customers and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It is an important conversation, and we are in fact glad to have been here, and we thank you and your team for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bob, and everyone at TNTech. I would ask Mr. Ravindra Nanga, Chairman of WASA, for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Chairman, and let me, on behalf of the team at WASA, express our gratitude for the invitation to be part of this important committee. We certainly hope that our submission in December proven useful to the work of the committee. We certainly hope that we were able to assist further in answering questions posed today, and we remain at the committee's request to provide further assistance in the event that such assistance is needed. So once again, on behalf of the team, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nanga. Professor Michael.
Thank you, Chair. The university stands committed to assisting by way of providing the science that would inform both policy and practice. Certainly, members of the team have indicated a willingness to assist in providing rigorous research to inform the work of WASA, and as well as the soils assessment that affects both WASA's production, flooding, drought, as well as TNTEC and its installation of the towers. We certainly learned today that climate change is impacting on the higher incidence of lightning events and how it causes a breakdown in the supply. So again, the university stands ready, and the team has indicated that they can do the assessment of risk and are willing, members of the team are willing to collaborate with some of the utilities, public utilities, in finding solutions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Michael. So as we close, I'd like to thank everyone, all the officials from the respective entities who have joined us today. We thank you for being very forthright, providing all the data that and responding to the questions asked by members of the committee. I'd just like to remind you that the Secretariat would be in contact with you all, requesting further information in writing, and we look forward to your continued cooperation. Member Sagram Singh Suklal did congratulate the Ministry of Public Utilities and also to some extent WASA regarding this conference on revenue, water, and climate change related impacts. So we trust that that conference goes well. And we also trust that maybe members of the committee will be extended an invitation to attend your conference. But good luck with that conference. I would like to thank all members of the committee for their attendance and participation. And of course, to thank our parliamentary staff, in particular, our broadcasting technicians, the broadcasting team, and our secretariat, our most efficient, hardworking secretariat led by Mr. Johnson Greenwich. So thanks to everyone. And I would like to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.